Morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on Agriculture Solutions Showcase Empowering Smallholders webinar, co-organized by World Bank, Plug and Play, and GIZ as part of the Hackathon, Indonesia Digital Agriculture Hackathon series. We have a very interesting set of events going on. Yesterday, we had a roundtable with Indonesian agtechs and the government, which led to very interesting discussion. And we also learned about a lot of innovative agtech startups which are working in the Indonesian ecosystem. And it led to some interesting possibilities of public-private partnerships there. My name is Parmesh Shah. I am the global lead for data-driven and digital agriculture at the World Bank. And a warm welcome to all of you. Digital agriculture has the potential to be a game changer for agriculture in Indonesia. We can see now clearly that there is a fintech revolution happening in Indonesia. And we envisage that if an agtech revolution also happens in Indonesia, it can help farmers and agribusinesses access information, make better decisions, use data and technology, and use resources more productively and sustainably. It also provides an opportunity to attract a new generation of young farmers and entrepreneurs into agriculture and food sector. Government of Indonesia is committed to strengthening digital approaches in agriculture and the food systems. The World Bank is supporting the government in the transition to the new kind of diversified agriculture and horticulture and aquaculture using climate smart agriculture technologies and practices, and in harnessing the potential of disruptive digital technologies to tackle the key issues of productivity, market access, and climate adaptive agriculture. We are doing that in 3 ways. We are also providing technical assistance for transformation of Indonesia's agri-food system. Second is also by providing financial support in piloting and mainstreaming the use of digital technologies. And finally, by leveraging our extensive global network and convening power to facilitate knowledge and learning and strategic partnerships in digital agriculture. Today's discussion aims to showcase experiences from other countries and enable the Indonesian agtech startups and ecosystem to learn from what's happening elsewhere. We have experiences from South Asia, Africa, South America on sustainable and scalable data use and digital cases that have helped to empower smallholder farmers. In the first session, we will hear from Alka Samnik-Mathi. She's from GIZ and leads their program on digital agriculture, I4Ag initiative, that supports database solutions to improve the lives of smallholder farmers, especially women. And she will also introduce us to a panel of innovators which are going to form the panel today. And it's Tiffany Tong, co-founder and CEO of Alloy Technologies, Sarah Mackay, head of fundraising and partnerships at Producers Direct, and John Joptiani, co-CEO of Farm Better. So over to you, Alkai, for initiating the first segment, please.
Thank you very much, Parmesh, and good morning to everyone, and especially also good afternoon to all those in Indonesia. Very, very happy to be here, and especially happy to do the first presentation today, because what we would like to do is briefly introduce to you a little bit of the background on why we want to promote innovations in agriculture. And that's why we would like to give you a bit of a background on this idea of, there we go, on this idea why we think digitalization plays such an important role in addressing both social, economic, and organizational change worldwide, but what we also need to be aware of when we think about digitalization. So, of course, as you might know, digitalization has great promise, but there are also several things that we need to think about. And unfortunately, There we go. And because on the one hand, of course, it brings great promise. On the other hand, also a few challenges, because innovation cycles are shortening, it feels like by the day at the moment. And the complexity of especially various technological innovations are increasing extremely. And we also need to think about if the complexity of technological innovations increases, what does that actually mean for the future? And what does that mean for the inherent technologies themselves? Because we strongly believe that the present builds the future. So to make it more concrete, nothing that we do now or everything we do now influences the future. And we need to think about who builds it, who is responsible for building these technologies, for designing them, developing them, implementing them. And because at the end of the day, we believe that technology is only a crystallization of its creators, meaning we as creators strongly influence the development of technologies. Which is why we need to take control of the scenarios surrounding technology. So that means that we really need to think about if everything is so complex these days and technologies can play a positive role in addressing the complexity, but we also need to think, though, about what the positive, but also the potential challenges that technologies bring. And we as designers of these technologies, and you as the participants of the hackathon, or as a community who is involved in technological innovations, are surely aware of that it is also your views that are in a certain way, and your experiences that are in a certain way reflected in the technologies that you design and then later implement. Because I don't know if you know Kranzberg, he is, I could actually say before the principles for digital development were developed, he wrote a couple of principles on this already at the beginning of the previous century. And he said that technologies are neither good nor bad, but they are not neutral. So we really need to think about our role in designing these technologies. Because, as you know, drones can have great positive effects. For example, now during the COVID crisis, we saw that drones can deliver medicine, but we also know in agriculture, drones can be used for pesticide management. They can be used for surveying plots of land, assisting with demarcation and village planning. But at the same time, they can also be misused for very dangerous things. So that's why at the end of the day, we need to think about how do we actually understand technologies, especially technologies that will only come on the market now. And for that, we need to understand their technological maturity, so where their sustainability impact, but also their gender impact, which is very important. And the GIZ 2 years ago developed the tech detector, which is the first technology radar for sustainable development. And with that, we're really trying to grasp the complexities that especially emerging technologies bring, but also understand especially the impacts that they have. And I mentioned especially on sustainability regarding climate change, for example, or biodiversity, on gender impacts and other human rights aspects. So it's very important to understand that and also to reflect on those criteria when developing and designing your own technologies. And that's why we also, as part of the tech detector, have this future of agriculture and food security layer, where we've listed several technologies that are related to agriculture, but where you can interact with these technologies and get also a feeling for the potential impacts that they might have, and you can even rate the impacts yourself. So to jump over for I for Ag now, that's everything I've presented now is a little bit of the rationale why we even in the digitalization portfolio of the I for Ag fund, which is commissioned by the German Ministry for Development Corporation, the BMZ, is that we really think that we want to support and promote innovations, especially gender sensitive innovations for sustainable agri-food sector. But we also need to think of the impacts, especially the digital innovations that we support. And for that, we need to look at the different criteria to make sure that they really are that they're not only gender sensitive, but that they have that they have positive effects, and that we can mitigate the negative ones as well to, in the end, ensure that we create enhanced productivity for especially smallholder farmers. And to put that into practice, we're very, very happy to have some of these projects that we're already supporting here as speakers today. We have 3 great speakers who will follow me just now so that we move from theory to practice. But just to give you a brief overview, we are already, as part of the i4Ag digital portfolio, supporting the AgriPath project, which John will talk to you about just now, especially the Farm Better app. This looks at how we can create effective and efficient digital pathways in India, Nepal, Burkina Faso. The AgriPath project is bigger as well. They also have some other countries that they look at. And here it's a multi-stakeholder project which really tries to understand the intra-household dynamics also of how digital technologies are used and adopted, and especially with regards to using data to make those decisions through, for example, UX design, or how farmers use, for example, the Farm Better app, and to really improve the digital solutions. Then we also have Sarah from Producers Direct, who will present on Croppy, which is another great showcase on how data is used for crop yield predictions for smallholder farmers, and how, if we use data by and for smallholder farmers, we can really have great impacts on agricultural productivity and then ultimately livelihoods. And as a last example here, we don't have any speakers yet. This is kicking off today, as we have a satellite-based digital solutions for climate-friendly agriculture implemented by also a host of partners in India and Kenya. And here we will try to look at how we can use remote sensing to do soil sampling, or to see the soil organic carbon buildups, and ultimately link that to the CO2 certification. Which is a very climate-oriented project. And here, once again, data plays an extremely important role, in this case, spatial data, to really support climate-friendly agriculture. And with that said, that's the i4Ag. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, because we'd be happy to, of course, always exchange with great change makers in the digitalization field. But I don't want to talk too much, because I'd really love you to hear about more practical examples. And they will speak one after the other. At first, as Parmesh had already introduced, we will have Tiffany Tong. She is from Alloy Technologies. And Alloy, she will talk to you about monitors end-use business loans using digital tokens. And Tiffany is the CEO of Alloy, and she's worked on data development and innovation in several countries across the world for more than a decade now. And she actually also used to be a statistician for the World Bank, and has also co-founded 2 technology-powered social enterprises before. So I think Tiffany is really a great person to speak to you today about data and development in the agricultural sector. Following Tiffany, we have Sarah, who is the head of fundraising and partnerships at Producers Direct, and will present on Croppy. And she's also been in this development sector for more than 1.5 decades, actually, and has great experience working with social enterprises. And then last but not least, we have John Chaptiani, who is the co-CEO of Farm Better, as I mentioned, part of the AgriPath project. And he's also worked on digital advisory services for smallholder farmers in developing countries for many years now, and through Farm Better has gained a lot of experiences already. So with that said, I would hand it straight over to you, Tiffany, because I think this is the very exciting part for all of you. So Tiffany, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alka. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm presenting on behalf of Alloy Technologies. We are a fintech platform that is focused on increasing financial health at the last mile. And our name is a phonetic spelling of alloy, the metals, with the meaning that if you combine 2 metals, they become stronger together. And so we're combining technology and finance to make it stronger for the micro entrepreneurs. The problem we work with is the business financing. So there's a lack of access for business financings for millions of MSMEs around the world. And mostly because they lack income proof, credit history, and legally owned assets for collateral for traditional financing, right? And financial institutions, they do not know where the loan will be spent. And that is very risky for them. So all of this leads to an over $8 trillion credit gap globally. And we are also especially focused on designing for women because more women in the world have no access to financial services. And especially in Nepal, one of the problems is that 80% of households do not have a single woman who is an asset owner. That means getting financing is especially hard for women, and probably similar very many other places in the world. And also, especially in South Asia, only about 58% of women use mobile internet. And therefore, for us to increase financial inclusion, we really must design for the lack of access to technology and the lack of access to assets that can be used for loans. So I would like you to meet Segal. She is one of our clients. She is a rural and formal sector micro-entrepreneur. And she was trained in beekeeping by local agriculture extension agents. But after that, she wasn't able to get a loan to buy the necessary equipment to start her business. So she has the skills, she's willing, but she's not able to get a loan. And this is also because she has no formal credit history or assets to use for collateral. And she also uses a feature phone, as you see here. So for Alloy, our solution is to help improve access to finance for micro-entrepreneurs like Segal. We are a loan insight software, so we help monitor the end use of micro business loans using digital tokens. And our system basically works like a simple automatic audit. It's not as complex as a traditional audit, but at least you can track and know where the loan is being spent. And this helps increase the borrower's digital financial footprints and their credibility. And of course, we also focus on inclusive design. This is how our system works. We partner with financial institutions, whether it's microfinances or savings cooperatives or banks, and they lend out their own loans using our digital software. So we turn the loans into digital token loans, and then the micro-entrepreneurs, they receive these loans via SMS, and then they can pay accredited vendors. And then once they receive the goods and services and are happy, they pay the vendors, and the vendors take these tokens and redeem it into cash from the partner institution. So this helps de-risk the loans, right? Because the financial institutions can now trust newer borrowers with larger loan amounts because they are automatically monitored. So for example, even within agriculture, livestock loans can only be used at livestock-related vendors. And this is an agreement between the borrowers and the financial institutions. We are also helping the financial institutions move into a cashless banking, branchless banking era. For each of the users, there's different value propositions. So for the financial institutions, it increases the credit scoring data by approximately 5 times. This is what we, from our pilots, we have been able to show. So traditional microfinance, they collect the data in terms of dispersing loans and then repayment, right? But we're also able to track what happens in between. And we're also helping, because of this, helping increase the financial discipline in terms of borrowers. For micro-entrepreneurs, they're able to access more affordable financing, especially if they're new borrowers or they're requesting for loans that are much larger or larger than they traditionally are able to get. And this also helps them grow their credit history so they can take this trusted history and move on to other financial institutions if they want. And in terms of vendors, we're also helping bring customers with payment ability. So this helps increase marketing. And this can be used from any phone, and it is in a digital token form and very scalable. We are also a software, so we don't decide on the banking licenses. That's why we work with MFIs. And just as a small demo, this is our system. We have an offline app also, and it can function the same as our SMS system, but it doesn't require mobile data. And this is part of our backend dashboard, so you can see very clearly how the loans are being spent. This is one of our current products. It is the agriculture value chain, and we're scaling in Nepal. And this is actually our second product. We're working in a public electric minibus sector in Kathmandu. a similar problem of access to finance. So my co-founder and I started 2 years ago, and she is a computer engineer, and I, as Elka mentioned, is a data specialist. And we have some talented members in our team. Our bigger vision is that we can become a big data platform powering an ecosystem of services for micro enterprises. So right now we're working on input financing, but we can also move into insurance and subsidy transfers or even skills training. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tiffany. I just want to, thanks a lot. Very, very exciting presentation, a lot of lessons. Micro entrepreneurs are there abundant in Indonesia as well. So I think your application is very, very relevant to that context. I would also sort of like to remind everyone that if you have any questions for Alka and Tiffany, please use the chat box to ask them questions so that they can respond to your questions. And we will have a separate Q&A session also in the end, where we will harvest questions from the audience at that stage. Thank you. Over to you, Sarah. Now.
Thank you, Parmesh, and it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Mackay. I work for Producers Direct. Producers Direct is a farmer-led enterprise with a mission to empower smallholder farmers to improve their own livelihoods. Over the years, we've worked with our network of over 1 million farmers to co-design and co-deliver a set of services which enable farmers to overcome the many challenges they face. Our core focus at the moment is looking at how we can harness the power of technology and big data and AI to increase our reach and our impact. Now, we know that the benefits of big data and AI are simply not yet really reaching smallholder farmers. And this is a huge shame, as it is these farmers who really need this data the most. Smallholders face significant numerous challenges on a daily basis, such as climate change, and they face these risks without any access to external data. This is currently a data management system for a smallholder. Access to data to improve decision making, such as yield prediction data, could undoubtedly enable smallholders to farm more sustainably and more profitably. Now, our plan is starting with coffee. Why coffee, you might ask? Well, we know that AI models can be used to predict coffee yields, and we know that these predictions can be trained using a simple picture of a coffee cherry or a coffee branch. But unlocking AI's potential to support smallholder farmers faces one key barrier, and that is the lack of large volumes of ground truthing data available to train those AI algorithms. And these do not currently exist at scale because A, they are hard and costly to collect, B, what the data that is collected is not standardized, and finally, the data is time-bound, it's not real-time. So this is where Croppy will come in. Croppy is a photocropping app which gamifies real-time data collection in order to provide real-time yield predictions, agricultural advice, and access to financial services, all designed by farmers for farmers. To start with, Croppy will be for coffee, but over the next few years we plan to add extra crops such as cacao. So how does it work? Well, this is Sylvia. Sylvia is one of the Peruvian coffee farmers that we work with. She will upload a small amount of data to set up her Croppy profile and then take a photo of her coffee cherries. She will receive a yield prediction straight back to her mobile phone. She can immediately start to use that yield prediction to take decisions about her farming throughout the season, such as how much labour to hire at harvesting point. And then as she goes through the season, Croppy will incentivise Sylvia to continue to share information and photos. And at the same time, as she shares that data, Sylvia will increasingly receive more bespoke tips and advice, both from her peers and from experts. Over the seasons, her actual yield and predicted yield will be recorded in the app. And so Sylvia will be able to track her long-term farm performance and use this data to access financial services. Of course, at the same time, we're building a groundbreaking real-time data set, which is low cost, continuous and real-time. It can be overlaid with other secondary environmental data, such as satellite data and soil data, and made available open source to data scientists worldwide to see what they can do with this amazing new data set. Now, our team represents a really expert group of people. We're working with IDEO.org, who are experts in human-centered design, Producers Direct, who are experts in co-designing and scaling digital solutions, and CEAT, experts in agricultural research and digital innovations in machine learning. And of course, our international network of over 1 million smallholder farmers. Earlier this year, we received a small amount of funding from the CGIAR Inspire Challenge to start to pilot and test Croppy. And we've focused on two key areas. Firstly, we've been working in partnership with IDEO.org and our farmers in Uganda and Peru to understand how Croppy can add the most value to our farmers. We've spoken to our farmers, as you can see in this slide, by Zoom, by Facebook, by WhatsApp and in person to really understand what the user experience should look like, what Croppy itself should look like, and most importantly, how we add the most value. We're now building the MVP of Croppy, which we'll continue to test. Secondly, our colleagues at CEAT have of course focused on the AI and machine learning. First, they had to work out how to get farmers to share the data that is needed to train the machine learning. And that has been done now. So we've got over 1,200 farmers to start to train the machine learning. And they've also been testing different machine learning techniques. And as you can see from this slide, they're getting better and better at identifying coffee cherries and being able to count them. So what's next? Well, we're absolutely delighted to have been given funding from the GIZ I for Ag fund so that we can continue to pilot and test Croppy. Our next focus is a fourfold. Firstly, adding tailored agronomic advice to Croppy. Secondly, looking at non-smartphone user iterations. Thirdly, adding financial services. And finally, looking at new crops such as cacao. Of course, ultimately, our vision is to put the power of data firmly in the hands of smallholder farmers so they can use Croppy to improve their own livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Very exciting presentation, huge potential. So I think there would be a lot of questions for you, but I wanted to ask you that very quickly that are you going to other crops apart from coffee and cacao? Is this model replicable and universally adaptable to other crops also?
Yeah, very good question, Pramesh. Yeah, of course. So probably not to all crops, so because you need to be able to take a photo of it, so it needs to be above the ground. But we're thinking that citrus crops would be another good avenue to look at. But that's what the GIZ funding is going to give us the opportunity to do, to really kind of test some of the other opportunities that we might be able to pursue as we work on at the same time the kind of coffee side of the project.
How do you choose the countries where you work?
Well, so at the moment, Producers Direct, we have an existing network of smallholder farmers. So we work with producer organisations in specific countries. So we have a producer organisation in Uganda and a number in Peru who we already have a good relationship with. So that's how we chose those. But of course, as we scale, we're kind of agnostic. We're very happy to work with any smallholder farmers across the world.
And which crops in Indonesia you think would be amenable to this application?
Oh, that's a good question. My knowledge of the specialty crops in Indonesia is not as good as it should be.
I don't want to put you on this mat, but I think I have ideas for you, which I'll ask you later on.
Oh, do you? Oh, yeah. I'd love to hear your ideas. That'd be amazing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we now move to our next presentant, John? John, over to you, please.
Great. Thanks very much. I'll just share my screen. Okay, hopefully that is showing okay. So thanks everyone for having us here. I'm the co-CEO and one of the founders of Farm Better, and we bring digital advice to farmers. So as I'm sure you're all aware, one of the challenges that farmers face are the negative impacts from climate change. Traditional practices are less effective, and farmers are not getting access to the way they should to the latest best practices on how to farm better. Extension officers and services tend to be quite patchy and are often quite poor. So this work came out of or evolved from some work we did at the UN FAO when we were doing resilience measurement and developing apps there. And we developed a tool that would be useful to farmers right on the spot, rather than what traditionally is many, many surveys and long hours of assessments. We wanted to provide value to farmers right away. So we developed an app that matches farmers' locations and situation with tailored actionable knowledge for climate change adaptation and to build resilience. This approach is location agnostic and crop agnostic. So it can work anywhere in the world because it's based on users' metrics. So the way it works is we have an Android smartphone app on the Google Play Store. And we start by using the user's geolocation. And we have a short survey to better understand the farmers. And then we ask the farmers about what they want to focus on. What are their interests, what are their goals? So things like increasing income, increasing yields, reducing labor, et cetera. And then we have a database of over 1,000 best practices from WOCAT. And as part of this project, we're working part of AgriPath and GIZ working together to better understand the effectiveness of digital advisory services and what are the best way of promoting this, especially to vulnerable groups and marginalized communities. But we also hope that this will increase globally. So how does this work in a bit more detail? So we have a very short resilient survey just to understand some of the basics about the users, understand their goals, et cetera. And then we create a unique profile of the farmer. So based on these 20 different metrics of the farmer, we get a pretty good sense of what their context is. So we understand things using global data sets like soil type, altitude, precipitation, et cetera, matched with their interests. And then we use the WOCAT database and other libraries to present recommendations to farmers. Now, this is not a diagnostic tool. It is not saying, if you have this problem, and then you should do this solution, but rather it's saying, based on the characteristics of your context and your interests, here are other peer-reviewed best practices that have worked in that area. And one of the interesting parts about this is that it doesn't have to be within your country. So it could be that some parts of Indonesia have the same agro-ecosystem zone and context as West Africa or in Nepal or elsewhere. And based on that, there may be some practices that you could learn from elsewhere that are not just within your context. So these are some of the different types of things we look for. We understand the agroecological zone, the language, the crop types, soils, altitude, et cetera. And all this goes into our matching algorithm. You can sort of think of us as a little bit like Netflix or other matching algorithms, though slightly smaller company, where we get the metrics of what kind of context you have or what kind of movie you like, and then we match using our proprietary algorithm best practices that most closely relate to those goals and practices. This is our team. We have people from all over the world in 5 different continents. And yeah, we've been working on this for a few years now. We have active projects in Burkina, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, India, and Nepal. But we hope to expand this further because it can work anywhere, anywhere in the world. One of the unique things about us is it does work online and offline, but it's the only integrated app we're on the market that provides users with access to over 1,000 peer-reviewed and georeferenced land management practices. We have a marketplace that we're implementing, and we have a community that we're working with farmers that they can ask questions of each other and ask experts about different questions they have. We've been in lots of different projects, and very happy to be part of the AgriPath and this project as well. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, John. I think another very interesting application which has huge potential. I just wanted to quickly ask you that how do you demystify what's written in research journals and all and make it accessible to farmers? Because generally the scientists don't write in the language in which farmers understand it. So how do you sort of unlock that part, and do you have a content creators who create content out of the research papers? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's a very insightful question. So yes, we've been working with WOCAT, and they have fairly academic best practices that are done by predominantly academics, and it tends to be very complicated, very academic. So that is a challenge. We have been working to simplify and improve the layout of the best practices. Essentially, it's a bit of a trial and error. Part of this project will be looking at how to effectively disseminate the information. So is it through more images? Is it through more text? Is it through audio? Is it the community where people can ask questions or ask of extension agents? It's certainly an open question, but yeah, we've adapted significantly the WOCAT solutions, mostly the presentation, and taken out some of the non-relevant information for farmers. But that is something that we will be working on. We do have some best practices that we're developing in partnership with others as well. And we have integrated a couple different databases and manuals and such into the app, and we're very open and willing to partner with others to put as much data in the hands of farmers as possible. But the presentation of how to do that is certainly challenging, but that's something that we'll be exploring a lot with this project. Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry.
Thanks, John. Please keep on looking for questions which are coming for you in the Q&A side. So unfortunately, we have two places where questions are coming at you. They are in the chat side and the Q&A side. Please look at both when you are responding. So I've already seen a question for you already in the Q&A side. So please look at that.
Thank you,
there.
I will.
I just want to know that how we are doing on time, basically, because I think I would like to do a Q&A session before I move to Rikin Gandhi, who will be demonstrating a solution, FarmStack solution, through a kind of a video and a presentation. So I just want to check with the organizers. Is Rikin there right now?
He's not here yet.
Okay, so we will go for a Q&A session with the panelists who are here right now, and take some questions from the Q&A side at this stage, basically, so that we can allow Rikin to join in and then present the solution there. So the set of questions which I am seeing are related with connectivity, offline, online. How do these solutions work? Do they require connectivity all the time, or you have built a system by which people can use both offline and online solutions? And the second set of questions is particularly for women users. Do you need to design things differently from the very beginning, basically? The user experience is different for women users. So how do you do that? So I will bring in first, Tiffany. Can you respond to these two sets of questions, please?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for your questions. In terms of designing for women, we really believe in if you really want to make sure that your product is suitable for women, that you have to design with them first. So that's what we did. So we only partnered with women microfinances and only with women users initially. It's not that our product can't be used by everyone, but we were hoping to make sure that the way we designed is useful for the women. So for example, some things that came out of it, a lot of it came out of it, but some of the things that came out of it is that they were unsure about digital usage. So they needed a lot more prompts in terms of how the training was done, and even like private space to ask questions, because they were a bit shy about asking their questions, didn't show that they didn't know much digital usage in training. So like very specific things like that. And even to the point where the SMS syntax that we use. So even though we use SMS and it's very simple, whether we use a star or an asterisk or a space, like made a difference, right? In terms of how they used it. So we found that all of those designs, I think you cannot predict from the start what that will be. So I would suggest you to start with women users if you're intent on designing for them, and make sure you explore with them as you design. And then a second part for us is we really specifically targeted the historical disadvantages women had. Lack of ownership of assets, lack of formal employment, and thought really deeply about how to design a system that required less of that. So if you think about alternative credit scores that are currently using big data to do, they still require a lot of these historical advantages, and it still advantages people who have those, right? So our system, we're trying to help everyone start off on equal ground. How can you prove that you're a worthy borrower through your actions? And I think those are the two main points for us. In terms of designing for low connectivity, I think we could have designed an app so much easier. I have to say, like, designing on SMS is so hard, and making sure the system works is so hard. But we made a very intentional choice there to put more resources in designing for inclusivity. Thank you. I think you're muted, Parmesh.
Just a follow-up question on that. So do you see digital technology is not a panacea for everything. So do you work on financial literacy and counseling along with what you do, basically? Because there are lots of what I would say non-digital things which will also make it into a good financial product there. So have you used digital tools for financial literacy?
I completely agree with you. Financial literacy and digital literacy are both really important in terms of our users using our product well. So the financial literacy part is mostly conducted by our partner financial institutions, but we're also partnering with people who specifically provide financial literacy. And as part of that, we integrate our system to train digital literacy on how to use our system, what is the PIN code, how do you keep your data safe. All of those things are part of the training, and we feel designing that training well is just as important as designing our tech product well.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate those answers. There will be more questions coming, so just keep watching. Thank you. Now, in terms of women users, what is your experience of women coffee farmers? Is your experience different between men and women farmers, or you think they are agnostic to technology?
Paresh. Yeah, and I totally agree with Tiffany in that if you're not designing for women farmers specifically, you won't reach women farmers. So yeah, I think their reality is very different, and for all sorts of different reasons. The dynamic within the household, with the level of literacy, both digital literacy and financial literacy, and just standard literacy. So at Producers Direct, we've always taken the approach of being farmer-led, but I think in particular when you're designing digital services, it's really important to be women-led, and that's what we're doing with Croppy. And I think one of the things we found really helpful is empowering women to be leaders in the design of the digital services that they could benefit from, and then also empowering women to share the benefits of technology and using digital services with other women, so that it comes more from a peer rather than from some person from the city telling them that this is the great thing to do. So that's one of the approaches we're really using with Croppy, so it's looking to really empower women themselves, both to design the product and also to show other women how to use the product and how they can get benefit from it. Yeah, so I think you also asked a question about the kind of low internet usage, and that's another area that I think we can add a lot of value with Croppy, because Producers Direct, we've already been experimenting a great deal with reaching farmers with their own reality. So we have services that are available in WhatsApp, by SMS, and by a kind of smartphone app. So a farmer, and we've even started with more paper records when a farmer really has very low level of data literacy. reality. So we have a breadth of options that we can start to offer farmers, and they can take it at their own pace, how they progress then through the different options. And we see Croppy as a kind of window, as you could start using Croppy at a very basic level, and as you use Croppy more, you learn how to get more benefits from the digital application Croppy itself, but also potentially other agricultural applications. So yeah, that's our vision.
Another follow-up question, Sarah, is that uh, when you are looking at, because a lot of your applications have to do with how producers are interacting with markets, because market signals are there. So are you also trying to do some research with the European buyers? Particularly Europe has ESG standards which are different from many other countries. So are you doing some kind of a, education on the quality and the traceability side also as part of your work?
Yeah, definitely. So in fact, Producers Direct was set up by a UK coffee company, Cafe Direct. So yeah, we work very closely with a number of different coffee and tea buyers, both of those, to look at the kind of traceability side. And obviously also working closely with the producer organisations themselves, because they have great relationships with a lot of those buyers. So looking to create a connection between all of those different actors within the supply chain. And I think the power of Croppy is that the data doesn't exist very often on the ground about the smallholder reality. So what we can do is, with Croppy, we can take that data and we can provide much more insight for those actors into the supply chain. A lot of the time, some of the big retailers in the UK, they don't know who their coffee farmers are. They don't know where they are. So that's something that's a real value add that we can provide to those actors within the supply chain.
So if an Indonesian startup wants to work on this solution with you, how would you go about doing it?
Very good
Because
question.
there is a whole lot of coffee produced in Indonesia, you know that.
Yeah, no, so the very good
Indonesia
question.
produces some of the best coffee in the world.
I've drunk some of it. I think I 100% agree. So I think one of the first things I think, so with the machine learning and AI, I think that needs to be kind of adapted to each country, and specifically to the kind of the specific coffee plants that are grown in that country, and there's certain things like whether or not shade trees are used, or different farming techniques which actually might change the AI. So there would have to be a little bit of research and analysis on the ground of the differences, to kind of continue to train the AI model. But once you've done that, then there's no reason why you can't then start to kind of train farmers how to use Croppy and start to use it. I guess funding would be a bit of a challenge. Other than that, it would be looking at the research of how we would have to adapt the machine learning for that reality.
A follow-up question is, what is the generic part of your solution and what is the context-specific part of your solution? Is there anything generic in the solution that you can take it to any part of the world? Because prima facie, when you look at you take a photo and you are using the photograph to start generating data about the crop condition and all that, and then you're bringing lots of external data to overlay that data. As a principle, that principle can be applicable to all the kinds of the crops we are talking about, the kinds of crops, citrus or coffee or these kinds of crops anywhere in the world. But what you are saying is that you need also very specific research on what is happening on the ground, on how those crops are grown as well. So what is specific and what is generic about your solution?
Very, very good question. So I think that the beauty of it is that it can be very specific to the reality of a farmer, right? So that's the thing that we're trying to work towards, is gathering that data so the service can be as specific as possible. So for each farmer, as a farmer uploads their own data, they're doing that because then they benefit from their own data. But equally, similarly, there's some very simple pieces of information that you can use to provide more generic information at the beginning. So for example, if you can get the GPS location of a farmer, you know where they are, and you get their crop and when it's planted, there's already, and with the CEAC we're working with, there's already a set of clear recommendations you can make on how to kind of improve productivity and quality. So you can start with the kind of basic level of information, but our vision is that as more data is uploaded, that can be more and more bespoke to the specific farmer and their specific reality.
There are other question from Carlo, my friend from FAO. Please look at that in the chat and please respond to him directly. And because Alke, I just want to bring you in before I bring in John, since you have to leave probably a little bit early. Alke, what is the vision of GIZ in terms of expanding these solutions globally? Are you looking at just supporting them at the initial stages? Or if they want to go to scale across geographies, what is GIZ thinking about this?
That's also a very good question. Seems that you're asking very good questions today, Parmesh. The I4AC fund ultimately is interested in making sure that all these innovations are scaled. For now, the fund really looks at, regardless of technological maturity, at supporting and promoting these different, in our case, for the digitalization portfolio, digital innovations. In the long term, we do need to think about how to scale. As the fund, we see our role in connecting the technological innovations that we support with the right actors to kind of achieve scaling. But I know it's also something that you and your team are looking at, and many other actors as well, as how can we actually get to scale. So it's something where we are trying to actively, as kind of advisors on the I4X, see who the relevant players are, what kind of channels do we need to pursue, how can we get scaling there, and that's why we're working with a broad range of actors on this. To see how we can bring, for example, how we can support CROPI or the AgriPath project, etc., into these conversations that are around scaling, that don't depend on donor funding for future scaling, but that rather look at the business models and the sustainability of these technological innovations.
Thanks a lot, Alke. I'm very productive at 3 a.m. You know this by now. That the reason I'm asking all these questions because it's 3 a.m. in US right now, and I'm most productive during that time. But Alke, thanks a lot to you and GIZ for supporting this hackathon, and you have been a great source of support, both knowledge and financially as well. A big thank you from all the stakeholders on the hackathon here.
Very happy to support great initiatives like this.
Yeah. John, I'm coming to you now. Last but not the least. I just wanted to ask you that your solution is already piloted in many locations and all that. The same question I asked to Sarah is, what is generic about your solution? And you think it can go to any country? You just said that as a part of your presentation, this could be used anywhere. So can you elaborate that a little bit on how this could become a generic solution? Because I see a lot of elements of generic solution in your solution. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to, thanks. Yeah, it's not 3 a.m. here, so hopefully I'm a little more awake. The Farm Better was designed with scalability in mind from the very beginning. That was a key goal of ours. We've all worked in development for many years and recognized that there's fantastic work done at country level or even sub-country level. But if you want to make a real difference at a large scale, you need to have something that can work across countries. And it doesn't mean there's not value in specific country or project area goals, but it's important to have, I think, collaboration. So we hope that we will be able to collaborate with others on a per country or per region basis as somewhat of a platform. Our tool is not language or country specific because it's based on the local context, which is doesn't really care about borders or anything else. We use our metrics based on the agri-ecosystem zone, soil type, altitude, etc. All those ones I mentioned before. We have a large enough database from WOCAT, and we're building that. They're building theirs out every month, and we're building our larger data set of best practices to give a good sense across the world of what works where. So if you use Farm Better, which anyone can use right now, you can type in your information and it will provide a ranked list of the most relevant best practices for you based on your context, irrelevant of the country, the language, etc. And we sort out the translation. It's not to say that that will be perfect for you, but it'll give you a knowledge base of things that you could try in your context and provides you with some of that information. And that's completely, it's context specific, but it's not country specific. We have focused on the breadth. So each of these best practices are not like a whole university academic course on how to farm, but they will be things like, how do you do integrated pest management, or how do you do Zai plots or half moons, or how do you do drip irrigation, or how do you do agroforestry, with different examples. It'll say with this crop and this crop and this tree and that. And each of those are from a specific location in the world, but they provide inspiration, but they give breadth. So well over 1,000, but we want to work with others, and we're working ourselves to add the depth. So that's where I think, I'd love to, work with the other panelists here and other organizations to make sure on a country specific level that we're providing the depth. So this can provide a good introduction, but you need to have both the breadth for scale, but depth for impact. And that we're hoping to get there with both. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, John. And so again, the same question which I asked to Sylvia, that you have a very vibrant AgTech ecosystem in Indonesia. And yesterday we had a roundtable and we listened to almost 12 or 14 most prominent AgTech who are bringing very, very innovative solutions here. So if you had to work in a new country, how would you go about doing it?
Sure. I mean, we work in new countries fairly regularly. Obviously depends on what we'd be looking at. So from first perspective, you want to make sure that the regulation laws and such are all cared for, addressed. But if we're working with a partner, if it's a content creator, so we can add those to our database, and we can discuss whether that's for our free version or if those are premium best practices, and can have revenue sharing. If it is a service provider, if it's through a marketplace or a finance, then again, we can look at what their service is and integrate it into ours, or if we can link ours to theirs. So it doesn't have to be all within the Farm Better app necessarily, but yeah, we can easily create a local version of Farm Better for each country that still accesses the larger global database. But yeah, very happy to explore partnerships in that sense. Oh, you're muted.
Good response, John. So I think there might be more questions later on. I would now like to bring in Rikin Gandhi, CEO of FarmStack. It's a very interesting solution which has been tried out in many countries. He will give us a live showcase of how technology can guide smallholder farmers in their decision making for them to improve productivity, profitability, and sustainability of their farms. Rikin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Parmesh. It's great to be with all of you today. Share my screen. So at Digital Green, we're working together with a cross-section of public, private, and civil society organizations to co-develop what we call FarmStack, an open source protocol to power the secure exchange of data in the food and agricultural system. At Digital Green, we've been working with small-scale farming communities across South Asia and Africa for the last 15 years, primarily on agricultural extension services, working closely with government extension programs that run farmer field schools and demonstration plots to expose farming communities to improved sustainable agricultural practices, and to train those communities themselves to produce videos that are by and for farmers to share testimonials, demonstrations with fellow farmers to expand the reach and the adoption of these improved practices. And this work has scaled to more than 2 million farmers, more than 70% of whom are women, and very much in close collaboration with government Ministry of Agriculture extension programs on the ground at scale. Now, as this work has been taking place, a lot of data has been collected about what are these videos, what practices do they feature about various crop and livestock information. And then in terms of the various farmers that get exposed to this information, their profiles, their locations, the practices that they do or do not apply and adopt on the farms, and those that they don't over the course of time. And this, for more than 2 million odd farmers over the last 15 years, has built a very rich database that has a lot of possibility in terms of how it can be leveraged. And of course, there's not just Digital Green and our government extension partners who are involved in now collecting data about and for farmers today. As we just heard from the finalists, there's many other organizations in the public and private and agri-tech startup scene that are doing the same. And so the idea with FarmStack is to say, how can we put this data into the hands of these farming communities themselves so that they have greater control and consent to being able to leverage this data in a so-called farmer data wallet to be able to share this data on their own terms with the organizations of their own choice, whether that is taking this type of government extension data and being able to extend it to a commercial agri offtake marketplace who might use this data for traceability purposes, or for those transaction histories that a farmer might have with an offtake buyer and be able to share those records with a bank for credit scoring purposes. There's an innumerable number of use cases that one can imagine for how data can be leveraged across the agri-tech ecosystem. But for too long, data has been held in the silos of individual organizations. And what we're seeking to do is to create an underlying infrastructure or protocol that can enable the exchange of data across the gamut of actors in the agri-tech ecosystem. The great changes that have taken place in the agri-tech ecosystem over the last couple of years, especially in Indonesia, with the real explosion of new financing and new startup talent, is extremely exciting and is already showing the type of impact that it can have. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there is some increased siloing of data that has started to take place, and fragmentation in some ways with respect to the types of services and platforms that exist. At the same time, there are certain data protection rules in Indonesia that focus on the importance of personally identifiable information, for instance, that actors within the ecosystem need to comply to. And those compliance as well as trust issues in how data is exchanged while protecting the individuals of interests of both farmers as well as the proprietary needs of certain commercial as well as national data interests can sometimes be a roadblock in the reason why data isn't shared as seamlessly as one would hope to drive collective impact across the various types of complementary interventions and service providers that exist across the value chain. And fundamentally, oftentimes farmers themselves lack the ability to even have visibility over their own data, let alone be able to decide how they want to share their own data, from a government extension provider to a commercial agribusiness to a bank or an insurer. And so again, what we're trying to do with FarmStack is to say that on the application or at the service provision level, there's a lot of exciting competitive action that is taking place amongst apps and service providers who are developing credit and insurance products to offtake and input markets and precision agriculture advisories and the like. But at the enabling environment level in terms of the infrastructure that can power all of these services and applications, there isn't a lot of action in that space. And with FarmStack, what we're trying to say is, just like the internet protocol and protocols like HTTP enable the World Wide Web to build on the internet or IP protocol, and have allowed for websites to be able to communicate with one another, and for search engines like Google to build on top of them, there's a real need to think about what are those enabling protocols that can support this growing and diverse ecosystem of agri-tech innovation that we have been hearing about here in this hackathon. And so what FarmStack is an open source protocol, free of cost, available for anyone to look at the code to be able to determine whether it fulfills their needs and their security protection requirements. It codifies the various types of governance rules that the ecosystem needs, so that in a neutral way, certain rules of the road with respect to what are those consensual requirements for farmers to be able to control their data that need to exist. What are those data protection templates that are required so that the public and proprietary commercial interests of data sharers can be maintained? And how can we go beyond just simple access control to organizations or individuals' data and be able to provide usage level protections? And instead of having one organization be the aggregator of everyone's data, or some entity being able to look at everyone's data, which obviously would break some of these data protection requirements, how can we build a peer-to-peer network of data exchange so that the individuals and organizations who are sharing data with one another can do so without any intermediary in between? And how can farmers ultimately be able to discover services and applications on their own volition so that we can flip the agri-tech ecosystem and put small-scale farmers really at the center and give them the agency and the choice to decide who they want to connect with and how? And the core to this idea is that what's needed is to create an agri-data marketplace. But no marketplace can exist if the consumers and the providers are not able to agree to the terms in which they exchange data and where their individual interests can be protected. And one of the basic challenges has been that data access control tends to be very binary in nature. If I share my data with you, you can essentially store and forward my data as you wish. You can even potentially charge others for my data. But for real data marketplaces to persist and for data monetization to even be possible by both farmers as well as organizations that work with farmers, we need to go to a higher level data usage policies that allow a data provider to restrict what a data consumer can do with their data at a functional level. To, for instance, say, you can use my data for a pre-specified amount of time or access attempts or for a particular service, but you can't store and forward my data. Or that I can set certain types of rules with respect to how much I might be willing for you to access my data, but with certain pricing requirements. And that's what we see as most critical for a marketplace to exist. And this is what it looks like in practice between a individual data provider organization who might be working with a individual farmer who has the ability to consent to saying, I'm willing to share this or that data. And when my data is aggregated by a particular data provider, those consent tokens are transferred to the data consumer to restrict, again, what they can do with the data provider's data with the rules of consent that that individual farmer did or did not provide, so that if there is a change of custody of this data of this farmer, that consent goes along with it. And what we envision is a network of sorts, like we have on the internet, where there are domain providers who are certified to be legitimate actors on the World Wide Web and are issued SSL and domain certificates. And similarly, in this data exchange ecosystem, these are legitimate data providers and consumers, and that there are certain types of usage policies that govern how exchange in this network takes place with respect to certain requirements on consent, sensitive, personally identifiable information, encryption requirements from end to end. And in that way, we create an agri-tech ecosystem network that has a stewardship of the government, as well as perhaps a consortium of both public and private actors, and where individual participants are able to share data with one another peer-to-peer with these usage policy constraints. So with that, I would like to just take 5 minutes to share with you a quick demonstration of how this system works in practice. And we've had the great pleasure of working together with an actor in the Indonesian ecosystem, Eden Farm, and been able to see how their data, specifically with respect to chili market price data, can be shared within this hackathon itself, and where participants can leverage it to build their own innovative solutions.
Due to Indonesia's diverse geography, a variety of agroclimatic conditions exist in the country, which dictate regional differences in the timing of these. The demand for those same commodities fluctuates throughout the year. For example, around major holidays, the demand for chilies could spike across the country. These factors often lead to a mismatch in supply and demand, which contributes to price fluctuations. Further complications are rising due to a changing climate. Variability in weather and other climatic parameters means there is a need to build a more resilient chili sector. As farmers and traders endeavor to align production and delivery with a series of moving targets, there's an opportunity to leverage existing data to help inform these key value chain actors. Aggregate supply and demand estimates, including international trade estimates based on recent historical data, help farmers adjust the type and quantity of crops to be grown for a particular season, and ensure traders are able to identify where to source products from at a given point in time. Furthermore, this aggregate data can help governments and other value chain actors make import-export decisions. Eden Farm holds a wealth of chili market data for West Java, Indonesia, and is interested in providing secure access to the last year of geolocated historical chili price data via a FarmStack connector, in order to provide value chain actors with the information they need to make more informed business decisions. To enable data-driven solutions in food and agriculture, FarmStack reimagines data sharing mechanisms that can unify fragmented platforms, build systemic trust, and put control back in the hands of agricultural ecosystem actors, especially farmers. Without FarmStack, data sharing comprises prolonged technical discussions, multiple negotiations, and lengthy legal documents to safeguard the data rights of the providers and consumers. Even after the lengthy processes, the data providers are wary of the unintended use of their data, while the consumers are worried about the risks associated with data leaks. With FarmStack, organizations can confidently share data and easily define and control the terms of use. Peer-to-peer connectors transfer data directly without any third-party involvement and configure policies that govern how this data is used. For individual farmers, FarmStack allows users to manage consent on how to share data in return for connecting to a new service. This maximizes farmer agency and our collective impact. this challenge, Eden Farm is providing a real data set which shows historical chili prices. The goal of this exercise is to demonstrate how this data can be used to create insights which can inform value chain actors' decision-making. We might choose to show how this data can provide direct insights, like how prices fluctuate relative to geography and time, or combine this data with related parameters such as soil and weather characteristics. In order to access the data set, FarmStack acts as a secure data exchange layer, which also codifies the usage policies which were defined by Eden Farm. The connectors enable users to access Eden Farm's data on a variety of platforms while protecting the data from misuse. Next, you'll see a demonstration of how to access the data via FarmStack. It's important to note that the data can be plugged into other applications as needed to enable the solution you envision, as long as you abide by the usage policies provided by Eden Farm. The minimum viable product that you'll see in this demo was developed by FarmStack in just the last few days. And we're excited to see what other solutions and visualizations you all are able to devise as part of this hack.
Eden Farm has offered to share historical data of the price of chili in Western Java region. This data set has the details about the date, the price, and it's georeferenced with a latitude and longitude. And the data is sensitive and proprietary in nature, and it is provisioned using FarmStack. The FarmStack is running on the Zero Cloud instance, and the data is available through this simple portal where a user can go and the data provider can enforce a differential access control. So there are two sets of users, one who have the access to the data, the interpreted data overlaid on the map, and the other who have not only the interpreted data on the map, but also the raw data. So here I'll just show an example of how you can connect to a FarmStack connector and consume the data in your sheet, where then you can use it for your analysis. So if I log in, I see nice overlay of the map and also the raw data on the sheet. We're also planning to have a much more comprehensive display of data on the Planet website and tools, where the data will be the heat map of the price fluctuations will be available not only geospatial but also in the temporal scale. And now I can access the raw data in the sheet, and I have the details of the date, the name of the commodity, the price, and the location. This data is extremely important because now I can use the information here to combine it with the weather information, the historical weather information, and the soil information, and so on, and can create a comprehensive model that can predict long-term and short-term chili price fluctuations. And the importance of that is not only for the farmers who can fetch better price, but also for the entire ecosystem actors, the buyers, the aggregators, or even storage providers. So this data is available on this particular website. Please feel free to visit this, analyze this data, use this data, and create the models. Thank you.
So yeah, this demonstration is live, and it was done in collaboration with the Microsoft Azure team as well as the Eden Farm team. And we'd encourage those finalists for this hackathon to see how they can link their solutions with this data to create an even bigger impact while protecting the various types of data interests that each entity has with one another. And thank you so much for allowing me to join today. Back to you, Parmesh.
Thank you very much, Ricken, and really presenting an idea whose time will come. This idea is a little bit ahead of time. There's a lot of data there, doesn't get integrated, it's very fragmented. farmers don't have control over data. Stakeholders feel that data will be lost, and that's why they don't come to the next level of product development and co-production there. So I think it augurs well for how we'll go there. So there are some questions which have come in. Some are very factual questions. Is how is Farmstock thinking of adding partners into an open source platform? How do you add new partners to the platform itself? And then ask you some other questions which have come up.
Sure. So as an open source protocol, the basic idea is that organizations can use this for themselves. The basic process is to install a FarmStack connector on the existing data infrastructure that an organization has, whether that's on the cloud, on a service like Azure, or maybe they have their data on a local server or device. There are basically these custom connectors for different types of existing data infrastructure that can just be installed on that setup. And then once those connectors have been installed, the data consumer essentially installs a connector of their own on whatever infrastructure that they have. And then these two connectors that are installed on both the data provider and the consumer are then linked to one another via specifying the IP address of each in a pretty user-friendly interface for organizations to customize the various usage policies in how they then transfer the data with one another. We're in Indonesia, we're talking to the Ministry of Agriculture as well as other key stakeholders in the ecosystem to explore who could be a steward of sorts for the overall ecosystem to help to govern the overall network, to facilitate the discovery of organizations and individuals who are making their data available via FarmStack.
Okay, so I think that's a very good point. So I think there are some players who are large and there are some players who are small, and then you have farmer organizations and all. So how do you see this, governance working out? Who will be the kind of arbiter if there is a dispute in such a situation?
Yeah, so the idea in the governance model that FarmStack is able to codify is that there are these multiple roles of different actors in the agri-tech ecosystem of data sharing. There's a steward who is the certification authority of saying who are the organizations who are legitimate actors of both providing or consuming data, and what are the rules of the road with respect to certain types of personally identifiable individual protections, as well as encryption requirements and even audit requirements. And so what the FarmStack protocol also enables is the ability to audit whether the way in which a data provider provided their data to a data consumer, whether that consumer conformed to the rules or not. It creates a trace to say that was my data used in the intended manner, or was it perhaps misused in a way that I didn't? And so then the role of the steward is to make sure that if there is a malicious actor who might be, for instance, sucking up other people's data and exploiting it, for instance, that they are removed from the network and that they can't participate. And so this is one of the key functions of the FarmStack governance model.
Alka has a very interesting question. Alka is saying that how can farmers profit financially from their data? Is that foreseen in the application of this protocol? And we are also looking at data vouchers now, because we have a lot of these vouchers for fertilizers and all, but we don't have anything called data vouchers. So what do you see as that? Will people get services in lieu of the data they provide? Some kind of free services or something in lieu of the data they have provided, or some kind of a voucher for that? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, the monetization or pricing of data, especially by both farmers and organizations that work with farmers, whether that's a farmer producer organization or an agri-tech startup, is a really important function that we've also designed FarmStack for, because pricing won't happen unless there are ways in which that data provider can set certain rules with respect to how they're willing to share their data. If, for instance, when I share my data, if it's just basic access control and I pass my data to Ramesh, he can then essentially do whatever he wants with my data today. He can publish it on the web, he can sell it or resell it as he chooses. But with FarmStack, he's restricted because I can then set certain rules to be, for instance, limiting him to being able to only process my data for a pre-specified application that I've allowed for him, but I don't allow him to store and forward or resell my data. And for certain types of usage policies, I can also specify what is the price that I'm willing to share my data with. And we really believe that unless the data provider is able to control how a data consumer uses their data, these types of data marketplaces and monetization possibilities won't be possible. And there are real use cases that can leverage it. For instance, ecosystem service markets, for instance, carbon offsets. There's a real value of the individual farmer as well as organizations' data of, for instance, verifying various carbon projects that this data can have. But I need to be able to control how that data is used so that myself as the farmer or the organization that works with me is able to reap that return and not some other actor in the system.
So another question which I've asked almost everyone is that, you know that Indonesia has a vibrant tech ecosystem. And yesterday we listened to many of those, not the ones who are coming on the hackathon, but the others who are already scaled up to some extent. So if this issue was discussed, how we will create a protocol between them, in future. So how would you go about doing it? So if you are now starting a kind of a collaborative data platform like FarmStack between the various AgTech players, they're also competing with each other right now, basically. So how do we develop that FarmStack data platform? What's the starting point for that? And what would be your advice to government of Indonesia or others who want to invest in such a platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is the one that's already happening. The fact that there is such an explosion of agri-tech startups and innovation, especially at the application or the marketplaces or the services that they provide across the value chain, is really the starting point to say that that ecosystem in Indonesia has grown and diversified with so many new actors and talent and finance that now, as you said, there really is a need for some base infrastructure that can support the ecosystem with respect to these types of data sharing rules and governance mechanisms. And then there's a need to identify who are the actors who could be the stewards of this overall network. And of course, it doesn't need to just be one. On the World Wide Web, there are multiple organizations that certify domains to be legitimate actors. But I think the most natural one in Indonesia would be the Ministry of Agriculture, given its role in including with respect to the various types of data protection, even policy requirements that exist in the country. And then perhaps over time, a public-private consortium can also become the steward of this network as well, so that there's shared responsibility across the ecosystem.
There are two last questions for you now. Alan is asking, how will you ensure that the quality of the data is protected or is good? And Alka is asking that, how do you deal with digital literacy aspects in terms of free, prior, and informed consent, communicating data governance and data sovereignty, how difficult it is to convey that to smallholder farmers? So there are two different questions. One is on how do you ensure quality of data? Is then there a risk that you get garbage in, garbage out? Or the second question is about how do you communicate these things to smallholder farmers because of the literacy and other aspects there?
Yeah, both fantastic questions. To Alan's one, essentially, there can be various definitions around data quality related to how vetted was some of this data that was coming into the system, to what's the resolution of the data in a geographic and time dimension, to how often is data being updated, and of course, the nature of different types of data, from like weather to farmer transactions to basic let's say land records. The nature of those data sets are all going to have different types of quality parameters associated with it. And so that's also a role of the steward to essentially determine what are those requirements. Does, for instance, every data source that is on a particular network have to have a third-party certification associated with it? If that is a requirement that the steward decides, that can be enforced via FarmStack. In addition, the idea is that the network creates a marketplace of data itself. And those reviews, ratings, usages of the data itself serves as a mechanism to indicate to other data consumers about what data is actually valuable and what might not be. And certainly over the course of time, one would expect that certain low value data sets, whether it is because of quality or maybe just irrelevance, might be weeded out over time. And those that are more relevant and more useful for more use cases would rise to the top. With respect to Elke's question, digital literacy and informed consent is super important in our experience. And of course, data is a very abstract notion for small scale farmers. And these types of rules that I just shared with you also can sometimes be even tough for some of us to even understand at a conceptual level. What we found as being quite powerful has been the use of videos. Our core piece of work around educating farmers on improved sustainable agricultural practices can also be a tool, especially when it's the farmers themselves who are speaking to one another, to communicate what is this abstract notion of data? What is consent? What is even the value of my own personally as well as non-personally identifiable information? And what are the experiences that I've had in terms of when informed consent has been a positive benefit for me, and when has it perhaps not been? And those types of case studies and stories from the field are what really resonate with fellow farmers. And then, of course, it is also the usability and the user experience with how a farmer or an organization is able to set these usage policies in a way that is leveraging, for instance, pictorial representations for those who might not be very digitally or even textually very literate, so that they have the ability to not just consent, but also over the course of time, as their data is being used, and maybe even has a change of custody of data, that they receive notifications back, so that there really is this tight loop between myself as a data provider and others as a data consumer. And what we found really is that when the data is being used for real value creation at the end of the day, with respect to incomes and productivity, that's really when data hits home to individuals as being something that really can be powerful if I'm able to have control over it and I'm able to link it to organizations of my own choice.
Rick, and so we could go on and on this one, but I think it's a very rich discussion after the earlier session with the three most exciting innovators, basically, who talked about their global experiences and the relevance for Indonesia. So I think we are on for a very exciting time now, where we will be working with a lot of people who are the winners of this data hackathon. And we also heard from a lot of AgTech innovators who are interested in developing a public-private partnership in Indonesia. We had a lot of representatives number of representatives from government also yesterday there. And so I think it's an ongoing dialogue. Every day we discover new ways of working together. And today has been a very interesting day when we have learned from three remarkable entrepreneurs, Tiffany, Sarah, and John, and who have described how they are developing many solutions which look to be specific but are very generic and could be applied to a variety of other situations. They're like Tiffany talking about how to really enable a lot of women MSMEs now get access to finance and financial services and credit through a very simple solution by which people can join in. And she, through a human-centered design, brings a lot of women into the design of these financial products and services and achieves very significant results there with that. And data is powerful there, and it leads to development of very innovative products. Sarah talked about the power of places where data doesn't exist. So farmers can just click a photograph of their crop and that starts building the database. And then lots of other data comes from other sources like satellite data and research data and all. And that gets layered into different layers, and that leads to advice from farmers. But they are working with IDEO and others to build a human-centered design in which farmers' inputs are taken into designing new products. So that product also has tremendous implications for crops like coffee and citrus fruits and all. Horticulture is now becoming a bigger, income generator than agriculture. That's what's not well known, that India's horticulture production was higher than agriculture production since 2012. And since all the people who are trained in agriculture universities are very obsessed with cereals, and so we have not looked at the other models for using digital technologies for horticulture, which is also very interesting, what Sarah was talking about. And then John talked about how to use lots of, the customized products and all which comes from research, including converting research papers into actionable insights and products there. So very interesting set of insights there, which have huge relevance for what we do in Indonesia and elsewhere as well. And Ricken, finally, what you are presenting is could be the foundation for a new kind of a democratic data protocol, which is where people feel that they are not just giving their data and are passive contributors of data and are getting good quality products and services in return. I think there is a lot of trust building and platform building and protocol building and principles building required. And I hope that in our next work we do in Indonesia with these dynamic tech entrepreneurs and startups and the winners of this data hackathon, we will be able to work on jointly developing this platform. So thank you very much to all the panelists, and finally to Alka as well. Alka has really, from GIZ, who has been the big supporter of this agenda and supported this whole hackathon as well, but also brought in a good panel today. And we value our collaboration with GIZ there. And thanks a lot to all the organizers, Alika and the team, which has done a wonderful job in organizing this event. And please watch this space, because the winners are going to be declared at some stage, and we will come to the final closure of this month-long, jamboree. What can I call? There's not a better word to call it. It is a jamboree where lots of people, data scientists, innovators, students, international innovators, and thought leaders are all coming together. So thank you very much, and have a good day, and keep on participating in Culture Hackathon as you go forward. Bye-bye for now. And sorry, we have to take a group photograph. I forgot my talking points. So I'll ask the organizers to come back and please put your videos on so that there's a good photograph which will be taken for all the panelists on the session. Okay, please smile a little bit now. Don't be serious. And okay, please tell us when the photograph is taken so that we can remove our smile. So are we done? Have we taken the photograph, Alika?
Yes, I think we have. Please confirm, Vanessa.
Alfie,
Yes,
you have,
we have.
go ahead.
Yes, okay, we have. Okay.
Okay,
Great.
okay, guys.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you
Parmesh,
so
for
much,
the
everyone. Have a lovely
moderation.
evening,
Thank-
morning, afternoon.
Yeah, no, I'm
Thank
going
you.
for my coffee now, finally. Yeah.
Me
Thank
too,
you,
even though
thank
it's
you,
not 3.
thank
Thanks,
you.
Pamesh. Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Tiffany.
everyone.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, John. Thanks,
Bye.
okay. Thanks, Leslie. Thanks, Elika. Thanks, Ulfi. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Everyone, bye.